Hi everyone, welcome to our next episode of the HR Spotlight series. In this episode, we shed light on improving workplace diversity through HR strategy. I have with me Mr. Tushar Desai, Director Talent Acquisition at FIS. He has over 19 years of experience in the HR function within the IT product as well as solutions industry in areas ranging from talent acquisition, talent management to employee centricity. I also have with me Mr. Utpal Kirodian, Head of TA, India Applied Materials. He has more than 15 years of experience in managing and setting up strategic talent acquisition processes, TA advisory in software engineering services, and large-scale organizations. And finally, we have Mr. Kalpak Huddar, Head of HR Sitel India. He has more than 24 years of experience in MNCs and Indian organizations spanning various sectors like ITES, manufacturing, aviation, and aerospace. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. A truly diverse and inclusive workforce is a huge competitive advantage. It not only brings so many different opinions to the table, but also improves productivity, creativity, innovation, employee engagement, and so many other things. So having a diverse workforce is much, much more than just a compliance-related goal. In this session, our panel of esteemed HR and TA leaders deep dive into this much discussed topic and share their experiences in hiring a diverse workforce. We have some really great questions lined up for our readers today, so stay tuned. I'm going to start off with Tushar here. Tushar, I wanted to know from you, with most recruitment and selection processes still driven by quick human decisions, implicit or unconscious biases have the potential to slip in, negatively impacting efforts towards inclusivity. Any tips or examples that you would like to share to identify and minimize such biases? And following up on that, what are some of the processes and technologies that organizations can use to overcome these biases?
Well, you've hit the nail on its head. Unconscious bias as such is inherent towards the entire hiring process, right? And from a diversity and inclusion perspective, it becomes even more amplified because people have their own values and beliefs, which they really imply upon what they understand out of the topic of diversity and inclusion, right? First of all, you start off with the basics, right? How do you do your postings, right? You look at whether the gendered wording, if I can put it that way, is clearly demarcated over there. You introduce blind skill challenges. You introduce interview processes which are more structured, which is panel driven, which has somewhere there is a cross connection and a cross check around that, right? And of course the blessing of our current times, like making data driven decisions, right? You include all kinds of data inputs to make those decisions to kill any kind of unconscious bias which is explicit, right? On the second half of the question, what you can really put in place is what we have done at FIS, and I'll speak for my organization, is we have made organization-wide trainings, compulsory trainings around how to weed out unconscious bias. It's the first step towards getting people to understand the meaning of what they're doing, right? And the second is introducing more technology, right, to kill any kind of personal unconscious bias, right?
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned training, because they say half the battle with unconscious bias is knowing you have an unconscious bias. So I think that's a great place to start. The same question to Utpal.
I think what Tushar put across, right? I totally agree with him. Specifics, I would rather categorize it into two sections. One is identify, right? How are you really identifying those unconscious biases, right? You have to ensure there is self-awareness. We have at Applied, we've run an inclusive survey internally to really identify those biases, right? Bias literacy is what we call it, right? And then facilitate certain discussions so that the technical panel, as well as the managers and the team, including the talent acquisition team, have gone through these kind of sessions to really identify those biases. It's all perceptions end of the day. And then to mitigate that and minimize it, I think we, like Tushar already mentioned, a few of the points which, you talk about job descriptions, ensure there is gender agnostic job descriptions. AI, to a certain extent, helps you pre-screen candidates, right? So it actually sets aside a portion of it where, you have hiring managers evaluating resumes, you have got recruiting team evaluating resumes, and then on and even AI doing this job of eliminating certain biases. So I think AI could be a good way of helping you minimize certain biases, right? Then diversify your channels of sourcing, right? Could be referrals, could be social media, could be the sourcing that has been done from your staffing team, right? You do external events, and then really ensure that you diversify that. Right? Gender bias is something that we commonly talk about today, and we have introduced women technical panels in pretty much every interview within the organization. So that's some of the steps that we believe in, over and above what Tushar had already mentioned, Rohan.
Thanks, Utpal. It's really interesting that you pointed out diversifying your sources. I think it's a great point because, having a singular source could potentially lead to bias. My next question is to Kalpak. There's a popular notion that hiring for culture fit and diversity don't typically go hand in hand. But realizing the importance of both, is there a way where organizations can hire for culture fit without really affecting diversity?
No. I have a slightly different perspective on this whole notion. And the point that I want to mention is, the culture is gender agnostic. It's a backbone of the organization. Culture has nothing to do with the gender. Diversity is the flavor. And how rich and how interesting workplace or productive workplace or engaged workplace you want to make will depend on how diverse is your workplace. So I think, and this is a culture. So if your culture of organization has diversity in it, and if the culture says that we should have diversity across levels, not only at operating level, but in our forms and processes and in everything else, the way we approach our employees, the way we source them, the way we promote them. I see a different perspective here. I mean, culture and diversity is one aspect that you told, and I did call out that to me, they are complementary to each other, and they are not different. They are actually complementary. The challenge is more, at least from my perspective, is not in sourcing. I mean, currently we are able to source diverse population. The challenge is growing them internally. And if I have to look at my own organization's data, probably we are tracking around 40% female gender at the time of hiring my frontline associates. But as they go up, the diversity percentage dips. And mid-level manager, that percentage has gone as low as 20%. So I think the challenges could be different in different organizations, and my feel is that we should handle it where the problem is and why is that problem getting caused. Diversity has to be in your culture so that it becomes collaborative and complementary to each other. You don't need to teach people to hire for diversity. They will want to hire for diversity. Is that the culture you want to bring in?
That's a very brilliant point, Kalpak. Thank you so much for that. I think it's a great point that you made, that diversity should be a part of culture. And ideally, the last line was perfect. You should want to make them want a diverse organization. According to a recent study by Indeed, managers and mentors are two of the most important contributors to women's success in the workplace. Keeping this in mind, how can organizations identify and empower managers and mentors, especially mentors, to foster the success of women in the workplace?
Success of any change initiative is around the environment that you create. And if it is safe, when I say safe, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from a mental and emotional standpoint, that initiative is bound to succeed, right? So, mentorship is supposed to be a little bit of an altruistic initiative, in the sense, you're doing some good for somebody, right? But even in that case, the biggest success factor should be about not how you're going to be measuring the scale up of women mentees, right? But on how many times has the mentee really been able to reach out to the mentor around the touch points, right? And that's more than enough, I think. So that creates a safe environment for the women mentees to even get a direction around it, and we have seen great success in this. And why I'm saying this is because we don't only have women mentors, but we also have men mentors to women mentees, and I think that's one single parameter at which we judge them, and the success of the mentorship program.
But Kalpak, I'm going to add something to your question. So, as I was saying, how can we identify, empower managers and mentors, especially mentors, to foster the success of women in the workplace? But I want to understand from your perspective also. You mentioned you're having problems in your organization with not problems per se. You're saying your data says when you go to a mid-manager level, the diversity is not as great as it was when we started. So, how are you tackling this issue, and how does this affect the prospect of mentors who are women in your organization?
Completely agree with the point made that mentoring and coaching is the primary motivator or influencer how that career of individual will shape up, right? And therefore it is very important for you to have a mentorship program that is specially designed to cater to the need of the gender, if that is the issue, or that is the area that you want to focus on. Otherwise as well, because that brings in diversity, that brings in fairness at workplace. We conducted a study that our problem was that while my entry level gender diversity was quite good at 40%, as we grew and as people grow up in the career, that the diversity was going down, and we wanted to find out why is it. We saw that there is no change in performance. The gender percentage is equally represented in my across performance levels. So I didn't see any bias in assessing performance or delivery capability of male or female gender. So it was really intriguing to find out why then people are not growing. Are we not doing enough to help them grow? And then very interesting point came out. Almost 20% of the respondent said that they don't want to grow. They don't want to get into different jobs because the current jobs are more helpful to them managing their personal work-life balance. And getting into a supervisory role or getting further will bring in probably more expectation from them, which they don't find themselves ready, which is fair. From an individual perspective, that's we should respect that decision. But it's obviously a point of thought that why would someone feel moving into a coach or a manager level will bring in more stress? That's a separate point of conversation. But the interest doesn't stop here. 50% of the respondents said that they were not communicated or prepared well by their managers for an upcoming opportunity, which clearly says that there is somewhere in hindsight, there is this bias in managers' mind, whether it's a conscious bias or unconscious bias, to probably get a little relaxed approach towards female gender when it comes to focusing on them on their growth and stuff like that versus other. I mean, from a data point, I'm not qualifying my statement there, but that's how the data says. And therefore, our effort now is towards getting to those people more and understanding where are we missing, what can we do differently, how can we create more avenues to pull this lot which is missing out on a lot of opportunities.
That's really interesting, Kalpak, that the data points you brought up were both interesting and kind of disappointing as well. That is the situation that exists. It's unfortunate that we are there. Maybe it's a societal thing, and it's a much larger conversation.
Could be, yeah. True.
It's something that we should definitely possibly look at. My next question is to Utpal. A very important aspect of hiring a diverse workforce is having a great employer brand. In this context, how can organizations be more transparent about their company culture and build a great employer brand?
Employer brand is a reflection of your culture. That's what I ideally look at, right? And if you have to really think about being transparent, right? It's all about how the organizations communicate their vision and missions, to the employees. Secondly, the key information about the company's growth, right? Facts and figures, right? Where is the organization trending? It's very, very important that it keeps the employees informed on a timely manner. So these are the two aspects that I believe you can enhance or be transparent, be transparent about your company culture. Secondly, coming to employer brand aspects, there is, I could probably divide that into internal as well as external branding, right? So from an internal branding perspective, you would first want to really look at how what's your culture saying, right? What is your internal culture all about? So study your internal culture. What are your employees really talking about, right? Develop a content strategy, which content could be your internal content, right? What is your candidate persona? What sort of talent that you really want to go out, right? And your storytelling, right? Have great visual content in place, which is about 60 seconds or 90 seconds visual content that you can share on various platforms. And then your company values. So we recently conduct a lot of pulse surveys within various groups to design our employee value proposition, which is EVP, right? So that is a stepping stone to really talking about your culture and building a great employer brand, right? And then exceptional candidate experience. One, you really have to train your managers, technical panels to treat your candidates and your customers. They are your customers, so you have to ensure that you treat them really well. So providing a great experience for your candidates. And then we also have to work on advocacy programs internally, right? Your employees, if they're treated well, they are going to advocate for your brand and your company. So these are the key aspects that I believe which is important for your internal branding perspective. And in external branding, as we all know, right? We have various channels, including your career page, Indeed, LinkedIn, have Facebooks and Instagram as the channels that you could leverage really well and impart these information out to the world. So in a nutshell, yes. And then finally measuring your efforts from an employer brand perspective, right? You really look at your retention rates. Are these efforts getting you greater retention in the company? Reviews of the candidates and employees on various platforms, right? Are we getting good reviews? Is there a great brand recall? And then your the sourcing channels, right? If you really message this out, are you getting better referrals and better talent from various channels that you have branded on? So these are the key aspects that we should look at. And finally, employee satisfaction. So you need to run some anonymous surveys internally to find out whether your employees internally are really happy with the culture that you have really built within the organization. So these are quick tips that I would say.
Thanks, Utpal. There were a lot of tips, and I think a few that really stood out for me were the communication. I think someone said it best: when in doubt, over communicate. And another one that really stood out is candidate experience. I think a lot of organizations sometimes forget that it's as much a part of your employer brand as all the other messaging that you put out there.
The whole piece of brand is a mix of policy, practice, and perception. Anywhere this mix goes wrong, your brand will get impacted. And the earlier study that I just shared, that people spoke about that their managers don't communicate. The same group indicated that we asked them a question that, do you see supervisors treating gender biased or treating differently of different gender? 90% people said that no, we get equal treatment. We don't see any instance where people are getting differently treated. Point number 2, we asked them, do you find your leadership approachable? 95% of the respondents said that we are comfortable approaching our leadership. We don't find them challenging, to the point that, what kind of structure of fairness and openness you have in the organization. So there are times when from a brand perspective, things may be perfectly all right. There are still some part of the equation that may be missing, that may be changing the mix of your diversity of workflows.
That's a very interesting take, Kalpak. I completely agree. Perception and they're some of the most important things. So, as I was saying, the last question to everybody, Tushar, we'll start with you. If you had to call out one D&I initiative, it can even be just a simple change in existing processes, which had maximum impact, what would that be?
I would say calling out specific quotas, right, in every strata, as Kalpak rightly said. While you get in people, and almost all the organizations are very good in that balance at their initial stages, right? That really gets impacted as you go ahead, right? And in leadership positions, there is a very strong unconscious bias which comes into play, and also market availability gets challenged. So I think fixing up quotas at every level, of course, it goes against the grain of equal employment, but there is somewhere where you'll have to make a start from an affirmative action perspective, right? And all kinds of diversity. I'm not only talking about gender diversity, even neurodiversity, etc., etc. Right? But fixing up a target, right? Then only can you achieve it.
That's a great perspective, and I think that opens up a bigger question about affirmative action and what really works in organization. But I've heard it many ways in different ways. So I'll pass the same question on to Kalpak. Is there any specific DNI initiative that you would want to call out?
I'm eager to share with all of you.
Sure.
Not want to, we actually wanted, and we have initiated this year. We call it Lead Her. This project's name is Lead Her. And it's aimed at, our targets are very clear. My front level gender diversity has to move from wherever we are to plus 40%. My non-agent, which I call it, non-frontline execs, that diversity need to cross at least 25% from wherever we are. And this whole project is conceived on 5 pillars that, and I would not hesitate using the word discriminately providing an undivided attention by leadership to focus on diversity. So are you hiring right? Are you ensuring that uh, you're not leaving any stone unturned? Point number 2 is the whole program is built on 5 pillars. One is We Are Equal, which aims at focusing diversity at the hiring level. Then the second one is Inspire Her. Now, Inspire Her is a series that we started running where we bring in female leaders from the organization and outside, connecting with this group, talking through their experiences of life and how did they manage. That could be a great way of storytelling where you can go and tell your people that there are enough female leaders in the organization who could be your brand. Third one is Let's Connect. I mean, this is another session where we are looking at creating one-to-one mentoring for that population, which we believe could grow into non-frontline roles, but somewhere not able to grow. Either they are not getting opportunity, or they are not confident, they are not ready. Somewhere there is a notion that, oh, I can't do this, and we want to break that notion. We want to break that jinx, saying that you can not only not do, you can do much better than your male counterparts. And the last one is Build Her, which is a whole new paradigm that we are trying to bringing in this project, where create an ecosystem for a person to prepare her for the role much ahead before she is even ready for that role. So every organization would have some minimum goalposts, right? Your tenure should be this much, your performance level should be this much before you move to a supervisory role. And we say, don't even go there. Target the person maybe 6 months ahead of it. Start working on the individual development plan, build their IDPs, build their clear succession module, and help them on the areas that they will eventually succeed in those goals. And we are getting pretty positive feedback from our female employees about this project. I'm personally very excited.
That's a great initiative, Kalpak. Thanks for sharing, and I'm sure I join everyone here to wish Sitel all the best with that program. It sounds very involved. Last, the same question to Utpal. Any initiatives that you would like to call out?
Yeah, I think Rohan, I know Tushar and Kalpak touched upon most of these aspects, right? So I would probably add a few more points to it, right? Diversity and inclusion, right? The initiative, the program, right? It's actually a top-down approach. If you convince your business about building a winning team and driving innovation, and if they are with you and they are collaborating with you, you have won half the battle, right? So in this initiative at Applied, what we've done is primarily to bring in leadership, women leaders into the leadership group, right? Which was like knowing our industry, we Semicon as an organization, you barely find talent, women talent specifically in the leadership roles. So it's a very niche and a very small pool, right? So we have definitely seen a lot of success bringing in great leaders to the leadership in the group. And then I think the work is in progress in building a great succession plan for the existing women talent within the organization, so that they grow in their career and become future leaders. So I think that's something which I would like to call out.